This is Power BI and more from CRM Audio with your host, Ulrik Carlsson. This episode is brought to you by CRM UG. The Dynamics 365 user group is the world's most influential user group community of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM users and partners. Across the globe, members have a common goal of maximizing and advancing the performance of Microsoft Dynamics 365 so that individuals and companies can improve operations, overcome obstacles, and exceed goals. We thank Dynamics 365 User Group for sponsoring Power BI and more from CRM Audio. Welcome to Power BI and more. Hello, Ulrik.
Hey, Joel.
So I had a question for you, and this is, I think, in the and more part of our series here, and that is the interactive charts. We talked very briefly about that, but
Right.
We've had questions, or I have questions very regularly about what exactly are the differences between the standard dashboards. I mean, if I have a dashboard in classic UI and I open it in unified interface, I basically see the same dashboard. So
Almost. There's some cosmetic differences, but
almost. So can we talk a little bit more about the interactive dashboards?
yes, absolutely.
To start with, what are the big differences?
Right. So, I think the term interactive dashboards is a little misleading. It is an interactive dashboard, but it doesn't. I feel like it doesn't mean that our current or classic dashboards were not interactive. I think that's one of the things I've been highlighting about them, is the interactivity of them. So I guess you can say we now have some more interactive dashboards available. As you mentioned, these are only available in the new unified interface. They've been available for a while in the, what was it called? The Interactive Service Hub, when we were trying that out, but now it's in the unified interface. And out of the box, there's only about 3 interactive dashboards available, but you can go in and make your own. And what's interesting about these is that you have to be a system administrator to create these. So something that you do create from the solution editor. Now, the interactive dashboards, if you look at the differences, because they're actually just showing a lot of the same data that the classic dashboards did. What's different about them is that you can show information in streams instead. So you can have multiple streams lined up next to each other, which can be a list of cases, for example, list of activities, to-do list, emails, etc. that you need to work on. You can, of course, argue that these streams looks very much like a view. It is just the layout is a little bit different. Right, and in essence, it is a view that's being listed on the dashboards. What makes them different is that you can actually filter and sort the entire dashboard differently. I should actually say you can filter the entire dashboard. That was one of the complaints or feature requests on the existing dashboard, is that you have this nice dashboard, and I want to say, hey, I have this great service dashboard with all my cases, everything. I just want to see everything that pertains to this particular customer. I just want to see everything that is, say, high priority. And then you will expect the entire dashboard, all the views, all the different visuals to filter down just to that selection. That is what the interactive dashboard can do, and something that was not possible with the classic dashboard.
Okay,
so you have that nice setup there. You can start clicking in, and you can do filter all your different criteria just by clicking on the visuals and kind of narrow it down to what you're looking for.
Does that mean that the drill through is more intuitive than the classic UI dashboards?
You can say how it's applied is definitely more intuitive, because you could have 6 visuals on your classic dashboard next to each other. You did a drill down on one of them and said, I just want to look at information for this particular customer. Everything else on the dashboard was still unfiltered. So you had one filtered component next to unfiltered components, which could be a little confusing if you were expecting everything to filter down. In this case, all the other data will filter down. If it's not filtered down, it will actually be listed on the visual on the stream that says this visual is unfiltered, or this stream is unfiltered.
Okay, so what about the what about the filters on the dashboard? Like, I've seen some that have the date filter on the top. What can you do with those dashboard level filters?
Oh, that is a good question. I actually think those date filters can be tricky. I think they can be a bit of a catch, so to speak. So one thing I say, these dashboards works really fast, and I think one of the reasons they work really fast is that they automatically scale the data down to only looking at a specific date range. So when you look at any of these dashboards here, you'll see up in the upper right corner, it'll basically say the date range is either this quarter or last quarter or whatever it is that's being specified on the dashboard. That is the only records that you see. In this case, you only see cases from this quarter or this month, for example. The reason I say it could be a bit of a catch is that it is not inherently apparent when you look at the visuals by themselves that they actually filter down by this date range. That also means that if I was looking at my dashboard today and it was automatically filtered to this quarter, anything that was opened in December, just a couple of weeks ago, or just a little over a week ago, would actually automatically be excluded, including other open cases. So you want to make sure that those filters are applied properly, so you don't have any, so any open cases, etc., will not get lost just because of that additional filter. So it is a big advantage that you have it, and you can immediately scale things down to only records, and all the records you're looking at, cases, activities, etc. The same date range is applied to all of your views, but you want to make sure that that date range doesn't filter out records that you're still interested in including.
And I guess it goes without saying that, well, I'll say it anyway, that to use that, you've got to have some date criteria to filter by. If you're looking at records that don't have a date, so how does it work? I haven't actually used this feature, so I'm really asking for my own education here. Do you select which field you want to use for the date filter?
Yes, as a part of the admin setup, you specify what date field to use. So that could be created on, it could be modified on, or it could be a custom date filter. SA due date, for example.
So let's say I have a dashboard that I currently use in Classic UI, and I'm moving to unified interface with interactive dashboards. What do I have to do to take my existing dashboard and make it interactive with the filter?
Your existing classic dashboards and make them interactive with the filter? That is a good question, because you build the dashboards differently and they kind of display differently. So you definitely want to review what you have on your existing dashboards and make sure that all of those visuals actually do apply to the interactive dashboard experience. Like some of the dashboards or some of the charts render very differently on the interactive dashboards. For example, you also have some additional chart types like the donut style chart type.
Donuts.
Yep, exactly. Which you can click on and the information will filter down. Those are only available on the interactive dashboard. So you want to see if there's some opportunities to update items there. Also, the way the streams are listed is very different. When you look at a view in a standard dashboard, for example, you have a lot. You basically just have one row per record. And depending on how much width you get it, streams are much narrower and kind of list items in a card form. So you have a lot more data on there. It even has like a little footer that you can progress out and see additional data points about the individual cases, opportunities, etc. And you can also take actions from the stream directly. You used to actually have to open up a record from the dashboard in order to work with it. But from the interactive dashboard, you actually have the same features that you do from the standard view, the opportunity view, or the case view. So from the case view, where you can assign, apply routing rules, add it to a different queue, etc., all of those things you can actually now do directly from the interactive dashboard.
Okay, but if you make sure that
you're prior.
So if you've got an existing legacy dashboard that you're using Classic UI, you're going to Unified Interface, and you make sure all the components are there, will those interactive features just work? Or is there something I have to do to turn them on to make that filter show up?
Yeah, so you were looking for an easy way to convert your existing... Okay. No, you're going to have to rebuild them. Okay. Because in the unified interface, the classic dashboards, if we just let's call them that, and the interactive dashboards will work side by side. So when you turn on the unified interface or go to the unified interface, you'll see your list of all your standard dashboards, assuming they're part of the app that you you have there, you'll see all your standard dashboards there. You'll also notice the charts are going to render a little bit differently. And you may run into some issues if you've done some more chart customizations that is not supported by the unified interface. But you'll see all your standard dashboards there. And then in addition, you'll see all the new interactive dashboards as well. So if you want to take some of your existing dashboards and say, you know what, this one is actually fit better as an interactive dashboard, or you want to take advantage of some of those features, you're basically going to need to recreate it as an interactive dashboard.
Okay, so if I have excuse me. So if I create a dashboard in the classic UI, I will see it in the unified interface, but it won't be truly an interactive dashboard. I need to recreate it. But if I create one that's an interactive dashboard in unified interface, if I log into classic UI, that dashboard's not available. Is that right?
Yes, you will not see it, and you cannot take advantage of it.
So what's your recommendation for somebody making the move? Let's say I'm making the move to the unified interface. I've got maybe half my people on unified interface. I guess what I could do is since the unified interface is driven by the model-driven app that I'm using, I could, if I have a unified interface interactive version of a dashboard, I could add that one to that app and not add the classic UI dashboard to it.
That's a good question. I think it depends exactly on how people are using their dashboards. Sorry for giving the classic "it depends" answer.
Sure.
But it depends on how you want to utilize these new dashboards, because I think they do take some getting used to when you're using the dashboards and how to show the flyout filters, for example. So when you look at one of the interactive dashboards, you'll notice you have some different buttons on top of the ribbon. So not just the selection on the date range, but you can also see that you, for example, have like a visual filter flyout that you can see. And when you click on that, it'll actually, your streams will go down, and you will see a new set of visuals on top of your dashboard that you can use for filter purposes. So there are some different features, some different ways to use it. So I think it's one of those areas, depending on how many users you have and how comfortable are the dynamics and how they adapt to change, you may want to do all of those things at once instead of having like a gradual change. Now the good news is that these interactive dashboards are fairly easy to set up, very in the sense that they're very similar to the classic dashboards, except there's a few new features, options when you initiate the dashboard. So in that context, you can set them up and have your super users try them out, give feedback, give recommendations, in particular onto how to modify those streams so you see the correct information that you can work with on the dashboards, and then also start working a little bit with the colors on the dashboards. I think that's one of the things that used to do a lot of customizations on the charts with, to make sure that when you have cases, high, low, normal, priority cases, etc., you want to, your high priority cases to show up as red, for example, or you want your normal cases to show up as blue, the low ones as greens, etc. And that was always quite a bit of a challenge with the standard dashboards, because the charts would just apply the colors one by one depending on the data that was available. In the unified interface, in the interactive dashboards, it's actually using on the charts, it's actually using the color codes from the option sets. So when you set up the option sets, when you go into the solution editor and look at case origin or priority, for example, and look at the option sets, high, normal, low, you'll actually see that there's a little color code in there that you can apply, and that color code is what's being used on the dashboard. So when you look at those donut charts or pie charts, etc., you'll see that the colors assigned to each of those values is what being applied on the dashboards as well, which is actually a very neat feature. And it's also being applied throughout the streams. So when you're looking at a stream of cases or opportunities, you'll see that there's this color strip on the side of the record in the stream, and that color strip matches your setting in the card form based on the color value that is specified in that option set or on the status reason. So you have a lot of configuration there on the colors and how everything appears in the dashboards. And a part of that is something that you want to talk to your super users about and make sure that they can very easily identify the correct records, cases, etc. they need to work on, and then of course make sure that there's no overlap. So if you identify a specific color with high priority cases, you don't want to use that for another status reason or something else too, because that could get confusing.
What does it do if you haven't selected a color for your option set values?
Then everything just shows up as blue.
It's all blue. But that's
yeah.
great, because that's something that people have asked for a long time. And you could do it with editing the XML, but that's giving you a lot more control over what the charts look like then.
Exactly. And you don't have to do all those extra XML, fetch XML workarounds basically in order to manipulate the data. So we could have things show up in the correct color. Now it's just happens automatically. And we talked a little bit about in previous episode that those color codes can be retrieved by Power BI. So you can actually apply the same color palette inside Power BI and have a very consistent color palette. So whenever you do updates to your option sets, etc., all those changes will trickle through to your unified interactive dashboards and onto your Power BI reports as well.
Nice. So one thing we haven't talked about, I don't think ever, that some people don't realize they have now with unified interface is entity level dashboards. If you go in the solution manager and go to the entity configuration, you'll see a node there for dashboards. And so this is something that I really haven't gotten that deep into. So I've seen examples where this is, for example, a dashboard filtered to that, say, account or case. What are there any limitations of the entity level dashboards, and what kind of examples of entity level dashboards have you seen people using?
So I'll say the entity level. I'm still in the early phases. From a production perspective, I'm putting CRM into production. I would say we're still in the early phase of using unified interface on a day-to-day basis. So it's one of these areas, but I've been looking into those entity-specific dashboards and a lot into the interactive dashboards and see how we can use them. And we're just going to take a step back and say the interactive dashboard comes in two flavors, basically. Single stream and multi-stream. And the multi-stream dashboard is what I was talking about. You could have your streams, review them. You could have all your different cases. You could have your different queues, activities, etc., lined up next to each other in these streams. Now, in the entity-specific dashboards, they are locked at being single-stream dashboards. Means that when you do it for cases, for example, you can only select views and queues that are directly related to the case entity. So everything that you do on those dashboards have to be specific to cases. But I do like them a lot, though, because they come in, the places that they're displayed goes well in hand when you're looking at you go to cases, standalone, we would look at the view, we would have like the list of records there. We could bring in, and still do, bring in a chart from the side, use that for filtering down the information and so on. But now we don't just have the open chart pane button, we also have the open dashboard button, and that's the one that displays the entity-specific dashboard. So you kind of have to go to the entity and the view of the entity, and then you can open up those dashboards, those single.
So you said it can only be data related to the case. Is that only like if you have a case level dashboard, can it only show case data, or can it show child records of cases?
It has to be on the case entity.
Okay, so that would be somewhat limiting. I can imagine somebody's well, if you're looking at a list of cases and you're seeing data regarding or summarizing that view, I can see that makes sense. It's not like you're looking at related to a specific record, but in that way that makes sense. So it's at the view level that you would see that dashboard then.
Yeah, and you're because you're seeing in context of the case entity. So you don't have a lot of other items to choose from. So when you want to add streams to those entity-specific dashboards, let's use case as an example. You can choose from any of the views, system views, on the case entity. And when it comes to queues, you can actually only choose queues that are of the record type case.
Okay.
So those are kind of locked hand in hand. Otherwise, you have the interactive dashboards with the multi-stream setup that you can use, which when you log into CRM, that could be your default dashboard when you open up.
But that could be an interesting. I'm thinking opportunities, especially where you have a sales manager who wants to see a dashboard specifically to a specific user's pipeline. If they had views set up for each user's pipeline, they could have an entity level dashboard summarizing that pipeline in a number of different ways, and use that kind of as the mechanism for viewing the dashboard for in context of a given user or something.
All right. That's a good idea. You cannot do that with configuration in the unified or the new interactive dashboards. What I think is a little bit interesting, you could actually add that type of dashboards with the existing charts on the form, on the user form. So you could actually have an additional user form which contained all of those KPIs and charts on the user form. And then everything would be basically just narrowed down to that specific user.
Right. What about the additional types of items you can add? Like the classic dashboards have web resources and URLs. Is that the same, or is there any difference for interactive dashboards?
So far, these are still evolving, but for now you can only add the defined components. So the streams and the charts are the only items that you can add.
Okay, and I guess that's a good segue to some of the other limitations. What can you do as far as editing them, as far as beyond the kind of like advanced? You have your advanced chart editor for classic charts. Can you do that with interactive?
Right, so this is one of my pet peeves with the new charts, right? Because
it's all been good for 20 minutes. Now we're getting into the stuff you don't like.
It's challenging, right? Because you can do a lot with the customizations. Now, in the process, as we're doing the switch here to the interactive dashboards, actually, as we're doing the switch to the unified interface, just to be more specific, doing the switch to the unified interface, we're actually switching from using the old .NET charts to using something called high charts instead. And they read the properties differently. And actually, what was happening in the beginning was that it would basically strip every single change that you made to your charts, any customization that you made. So that included like the color scheme, orders, formatting of numbers, everything. Now they've actually started supporting some of these, and it was kind of interesting. So I log into my environment here every now and then, and just to have a look at the different dashboards and what's available. And some of these here are actually they're starting to support more and more of the properties. So now a lot of the color scheme, if you applied any custom colors, etc., those are actually being kept. So you're not going to lose your color scheme like you used to when you're transferring to the unified interface. However, there are still some areas that are not supported, which I hope they start supporting. I think one of them is ordering the data. So basically sorting the data so it comes in the order that you specify. Mm-hmm. So if you have a leaderboard, for example, sales leaderboard, that includes both the one amount as well as the in progress amount, etc., and you want to say, I want to sort this by the one amount, or you want to sort cases by the status, etc., it basically ignores any order that you specify and just puts it in its own order. Whatever property comes first, if that's like the first name or last name or one of the first values. So you can't really specify that in more detail. I think that will be a welcome addition if we could get that, because that's something we can do fairly easily with the existing charts. The other area is the charts using option sets are sorted based on their label name, which initially sounds fine, but when it comes to and priority here is a good example where you have high, normal, low. The problem is when that's all sorted alphabetically, you have an order that's called high-low-normal. So if you look at your visual and you have, and everything is nice and color-coded, it's just an odd order to see your visual in, right? High, low, normal. You want to have that, proper progression of your data. And that's something you cannot fix unless you concede to one of those old workarounds that, we'll just call them 1-high, 2-normal, 3-low, etc. Right? And that's kind of like giving up. And you could it works, but as a consultant, and you're presenting all of this, and somebody says, "Hey, can we just get these in the proper order?" And you're like, "Oh." It's a tough one to sell, and it's a little. I hope they use or will pick up using the current sort order or sorting properties they have in the existing chart, because that's actually really nice. If you don't specify anything, it sorts based on the label of the option set. But if you do go in and specify sorting on the option set or the order, it will use the value of the option set instead. So you're not necessarily relying on the label, but you can use the behind the scenes, the metadata, the value of the option set to doing your sorting on. So I actually think that one worked really well, so we could basically switch back and forth on those properties in that order.
What about some of the ones I've used a number of times in the classic UI dashboards and charts are things like changing the XML to the way the series are displayed, or calling the number format in the percentages, or some of those things, to adding trend lines. Does that sort of thing work?
So all the formatting on the numbers is currently removed. So any additional comments, etc., that you do on your dashboards, any annotations, etc., all of that is removed. Any formatting and on the value, so if you have your bars and they would say, it usually would say like 300K, for example, it would say 299,697.98 or whatever it would be.
0.0000.
Yeah, so it uses that full value of the records, and you cannot apply any formatting to it, because that wasn't often, because when you work with those large numbers, if you have like 8 point something million, you don't need that down to the 2 decimals. It actually just makes it more confusing.
Sure.
The same is happening on the axis. All the formatting there that we can apply, that's being removed on the new unified interface. I would assume, given that they now added colors or accept the color properties, that's in the new edition that's appeared here in the last month or so. I would hope that all of these formatting options are being reapplied. Maybe not the way that we've been doing it using the XML code, but that could be a nice little setup, or if we could just have it somewhere in the interface or chart editor, or we specify, okay, this value, we want to format that in millions or thousands or whatever we want to do.
Right.
I hope it's on the radar. I recall when Power BI added that feature, there was a lot of rejoice on social media from all the Power BI consultants. So it's definitely a feature that's nice to have. Okay,
and so hopefully we'll have some news about that coming up in the end of January when we get the release notes for the next release. What about the number of items you can have on a dashboard? Is that still limited to 6, or can you have a different number than what you have in classic dashboards?
That is a good question. It is not 6 specifically. I believe you can have more than that, depending on the type of visuals that you're adding, but I'm actually not sure what the upper limit is.
Okay.
But since the dashboards are now basically forcing you to be more or less entity specific, you wouldn't really necessarily need as many, because you have like these few KPIs, etc., or a more defined area that everything's centered around. You're not going to have one dashboard that says, I want something about my leads, something about my opportunities, something about my cases, etc., etc. You're not going to spread out in the same manner.
Right. Okay. So if you are using, or if you're making the switch to Unified Interface, or if you're a consultant or an administrator for CRM or Dynamics 365, this would be definitely an area that you should learn more about, especially if you're making the move to Unified Interface, because you can really, for one thing, if you have customized charts, you'll want to find out what you can do to get as close to what you have as right now, and you're probably going to want to make some changes to take advantage of some of the new capabilities.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
well, we have a minute or two. Do you have any world tour stops coming up in the next couple weeks?
So, I do not. I've been actually my schedule here is pretty quiet when it comes to speaking arrangements, etc. So I hope to take advantage and do a little more blogging. I've been kind of holding back on that a little bit here now that I've been traveling, doing conferences quite a bit in the last quarter, 6 months or so. So hopefully I can pick that back up, because we have that's a lot of exciting new features and new processes to talk about.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So, Ulrik, well, I appreciate you sharing your vast knowledge of interactive dashboards with us.
All right,
And
thank you.
we'll talk next time. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.